Let the 2012 blame games begin. Republicans are blaming President Obama for May's dismal job report, but it seems like he has a scapegoat.
Right now, one concern is Europe, which faces a threat of renewed recession as countries deal with a financial crisis. Obviously, this matters to us because Europe is our largest economic trading partner.
While all the finger pointing is going on, millions of families in America still can't pay their bills. So how much is Congress willing to risk to help their candidate win? To answer that and more, I'm joined by Michael Hudson, economics professor at the University of Missouri. Thanks for joining me, Michael. What do you think about Obama's speech this morning, about him kind of shifting the blame away from America right now?
Well, it was a very strange speech. Usually, he's a very smooth speaker, but in this case, he was very awkward. He was just reading a speech, evidently written by his campaign contributors on Wall Street. He was blaming two parties. One was Europe, and the other was the Republican. The speech basically said, "We're going into a depression because of my policies. It's not my fault. Blame the other guy." Regarding Europe, he wasn't really blaming it. He was acting, a president here acts as a lawyer on behalf of his campaign contributors, who are really his clients. And you remember about 6 months ago when Tim Geithner went to Europe and told Europe, you can't let Greece default because the American banks have made a huge horse race bet on Greece, and we're going to go under if you let the Greece default. You have to bail them out so that we can make money at your expense. And the Europeans got quite annoyed at him and really told him to go to hell. So he came back. Well, now Obama's telling Europe once again, look, we've just seen MF Global go under, and a former Corzine almost ready to go to jail because we made bad bets. You in Europe can't let us lose any more money because we've bet that your governments are strong enough to push your population into a lost decade of unemployment so that we can make money. So he's insisting that the Europeans impose austerity and depression on their countries so that the Wall Street speculators can make money off the Spanish and Greek and Italian and Irish bonds they bought. So that was just a warning to them saying, we'll get angry at you. And remember, my kill list, just kidding a little bit, but we're going to put pressure on you if you don't do what we here on Wall Street tell you to. So it was partly blame Europe, but then the other half of the speech was saying, look, it's going to be the Republicans' fault if they don't pass the Employment Act that I propose. There's zero chance of Congress passing his Employment Act.
So is it a bad piece of legislation, or do you think that they're just trying to play partisan politics here and it's trumping economics?
It's the latter. Yeah, sure, it's partisan politics. Obviously, economically, of course, government spending would be much better. The irony is that here Mr. Obama is telling Europe, you have to spend more to pull your economies out of depression, but the way in which you spend has to be to give money for your banks so that your banks can buy government bonds and make a profit. You're not really supposed to spend it on the real goods and service producing economy. Well, right here, he's given as much money as he could to the banks with quantitative easing. It hasn't worked. If he really wanted to revive the economy here, the government would give more money to the states and localities, which are really cutting back as they're pushed into deficit, and they can't run deficits under the constitutional law of most states, or he'd begin government spending programs. He hasn't done that. He had a choice. The government can either give money to the banks or to the real economy, and he's given almost all the money to the banks, hardly anything to the real economy for employment, and now it's all caught up with him, and now he's trying to pretend that it's the Republicans who are wanting to give money to the 1%, not the Democrats who've been doing it for the last 3 years.
Well, so what is the real crux of the problem here, and how can it be solved? Austerity, bailouts, printing more money? I mean, what do you think?
The crux is debt. People, both consumers and businesses and governments, are using their income to pay down debt, not to buy goods and services. Well, the result is if you have an income and you're paying the bank, then you don't have money to spend on goods and services. So as a result, demand is shrinking and stores are going out of business. Here in New York, when you walk down the street, there are a lot of for rent signs on the big retail store streets. People are not investing in hiring more people to produce more because the market's shrinking, because the people are having to spend their money on credit card debt, student loans, mortgage debt, bank debt.
But Michael, in his speech, he said the private sector is fine.
That's what he said. Indeed, he did. That's nonsense. If only a speech could make it fine, we'd be great. But obviously, the private sector isn't fine, and most people are just going to laugh when he says something like that. The Republicans say, "Oh boy, this guy has thrown himself way open for a sucker punch," because obviously the economy is not fine. People are struggling. They don't have enough money to break even after paying the debt. They're cutting back their purchases on food.
They certainly are struggling, and sorry, we're running out of time. Thank you so much for joining us to talk more about this issue. That was Michael Hudson, economics professor at the University of Missouri.